The African American Legends series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, entertainment, and religion. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they'd been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Voza Rivers, Executive Director and CEO of the New Heritage Theater Group. Welcome back to African American Legends.
I'm very pleased to be your guest today, a very special day.
Well, we're talking about arts in the black community. We talk about arts in the world. And you, particularly in Harlem, have been a leader in bringing people together to focus on the arts. First of all, how do you define the arts?
The arts is an area that we market and promote that really reflects all aspects of what we do, from the way we speak to the way we take in our personal taste in terms of music art, visual arts, performing arts, the dance. It's a combination of a lot of different areas that we all classify under arts, and I extend it to arts and culture because culture is also an important aspect of the arts.
Obviously, arts flow out of a culture.
Yes.
A culture makes the arts, whether it's dance or music or theater or whatever. In your work, I notice you call yourself the New Heritage Theater Group. Do you focus mainly on theater and performing arts, or do you do dance, or do music? What is your focus?
When the theater company was founded 46 years ago, it was based on a model from the 1940s, and that model was another theater called the American Negro Theater. And that theater was housed in the basement of the County Cullen Library on 135th Street. And at that time, that company focused on behind the scenes, in front of the camera, and what are the other elements that you need to market, promote, preserve your art. So from the writers, from the directors, choreographers, technicians, front of house, all of those elements were taught then to the young members who had joined that company. Ozzie Davis was a member, Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier, Fred O'Neill, co-founded by Fred O'Neill and Abram Hill. That model in 1940s was the model that New Heritage was founded on. So my mentor, Roger Furman, a member of that group, decided in 1964 to recreate, going back to history, that model for the 60s. When Roger died in 1983, I then decided how could I expand the footprint that was created in the 40s, then recreate it again in the 60s. And so in the 80s, I became the executive producer of the theater and decided to create a wider footprint that looked at what was happening internationally, specifically in South Africa. I also looked across the waters to Asia, and specifically Japan, because of the love of our culture. And so for New Heritage, we are not only involved in theater and music, but we also embrace the visual arts. We use visual artists to help us do our sets and costumes. And I found out that our service as a producer could be shared with civic organizations, or you are the NAACP and you're having an anniversary gala, you could call on the theater to help produce those events and activities. So it goes beyond just saying that we're a theater company. We're much more than that.
What does being a producer entail?
For me, it really is where the buck stops with me. It is being able to identify and assemble all of the elements. First of all, it starts with one of the most challenging of issues is how do you identify the resources that it takes to do what you are passionate about. And so in my 46-year history of being with the theater, I've really taken on tremendous roles in raising money, publicly and privately, and most definitely from the community, in order to keep our doors open and to keep the artist employed.
Well, does the producer determine what you're going to produce, whether it's a play or a dance or whatever?
The producers, do it in consultation and in partnership with the artistic group,
Okay.
because we don't always have the best taste, but we have artistic directors and choreographers and others who are part of that process. But for me, a lot of what I do is visceral. I mean, there's a reaction to what I read or what I see and what I feel, and then that helps motivate how involved I get in projects.
Well, what about the support for the arts, particularly the theater and dance, in the African American community? We have groups like the Alvin Ailey Company that are well supported mainly by white folks. What about the support for our groups, like your group, the theater company?
I belong to a coalition called Coalition of Theaters of Color, and this is a group of 10 Black and Latino theater companies with 25 years or more service. What we have found in our coalition, which is a small sample of what's happening across the country, is that there's been inequitable funding from the public troughs. Inequitable funding.
Right.
And so you could find other comparable groups, non-colored groups that would receive more funding, in particular from the same body, the same type of work, if they were comparable.
Now, why is that?
Well, I think, again, it depends on how the community and funders and others look at the work of the organization. For example, if you look at a small not-for-profit theater in our community, for example, when I started with Roger Furman, we had a 99-seat theater. And because Roger used the old model of the American Negro Theater, it was important that when he selected plays that the actors have a stake in what happens at the box office, right? And that the community, so we couldn't just put on a play and you have 7 actors say, oh, I'm in a play, and that's all they have to do. They had to be a part of the outreach. They had to guarantee that they were going to bring an X number of people to see what they were doing so that it could help fill the seats. That was number one.
I used to get those calls.
Yes, okay, so you know, Roscoe. So that was extremely important so that the actors couldn't just be a star, they had to be a participant, a partner. So that was important. And then to get the communities really involved in what needs to happen. If you say you like us and you love the work and, oh, I laughed, I cried, and it touched my soul, then respond likewise. And that's been a real difficult.
But when you say respond likewise, you
by,
mean
by attending, telling your friends, don't hide a good thing. Don't say, oh, I enjoyed it, and then go back and not tell anyone. I mean, that word of mouth in theaters of color is extremely important. And also, let me also say that the endowments and funders, they look at, in today's marketplace, they look at filling seats with, if I'm going to make an investment of $10,000 in a theater, do I invest in a small theater with 99 seats and a so-so audience, or do I put that $10,000 in a Lincoln Center production where I know that I'm guaranteed 1,500 seats being filled every week? I mean, those kinds of decisions are being made every day as it relates to where corporations and foundations decide to put their dollars. And that and those resources are shrinking more so and faster for us, and it's more challenging if we could keep our doors open. We're on very thin ice right now in terms of continuing the work that we do, and if we don't get the support, a lot of these companies are going to go the way of the dinosaur.
Well, it's very interesting. Music in the Black community is well received and well attended. How do you make that transition from the attention to music, whether it's rap or soul or R&B, over into the theater? There seems to be a mismatch there.
Our theater revolves around words. Words can be very threatening and very political. Music can soothe the soul. You can sit and music can take you to heights and places without ever threatening who you are or what you are. And so when you look at that, that alone is a major difference between what theater can do. And there should not be any censorship on theater to that regard. So that's one element.
But we had the blues. See, the blues really weren't always happy. They were talking about the struggles we were facing. And blues is clearly not as important or not as popular as rap and rock and roll. But we did have that element. Is there something just about...
In music, now you're talking about the lyrics of the music. Let me just say that while we had the blues, I just did, for example, on Saturday, I decided to do something called It Ain't Nothing But the Harlem Blues. Blues musical for the patients and community at Harlem Hospital. They have a 400-seat theater there. So we did a free a presentation of Harlem Blues. There were love songs. There were My Man, Done Me Wrong. But they also talked about the weary blues, being in the cotton fields and some of those other things that we're accustomed to. It depends on how it's defined and how it's shaped and who's interested in those lyrics. I will tell you that overwhelmingly that presentation to me, which was a mix, we had all local artists, to see how they were received was just very interesting to an integrated audience. So ethnicity was all mixed up, and I saw everyone patting their feet and moving their heads, and I said, this is really great because it touches them. And that's part of theater too. So there's a combination, Roscoe. People always say, oh, well, people of color aren't really supporting the jazz artists. You can go into some clubs and there's no one sitting in there, or you go in and not many African Americans or Latinos in there. And then you can go to a place like Lenox Lounge and you can't get in, or you go to St. Nick's Pub, and yes, there are international visitors who really want the authentic brand, and they want to go to those places, but it's also a place for the local people to go. And so how do we balance that? I think that it's important that institutions have signatures so people can know what to expect. So the leadership provides that signature, and when people know what to expect, just like getting a brand, people like to buy Cadillacs because of its history. I think we have to look at all of those tools on what we do and how we present it to keep, to keep that audience.
Okay, tell us about some of the things that your group is putting on right now.
Right now, 3 weeks ago, we had some sold-out audiences for a show called Through the Night. And Through the Night, again, a very circuitous way on how I got involved, but it started at a reading at the Museum of the City of New York. Then I took a trip to North Carolina to an arts festival, a theater festival, saw the artists perform there, connected with the artists, and then the artist says, I heard about your work. I'm working on something that would be great. Comes back to New York and presents a work that I was so proud to do, but I also knew that I couldn't do it by myself. So I made a call. We met with Jewel Kent, who runs a theater in Riverside Church, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary, and Marcia Pendleton from Walk Tall Girl Productions and my theater company, and said, we need to come together. No one of us could do this production. So now that's another new area. It's this collaboration in order to get things done. So we just did 3 weeks of a sold-out performance at Riverside Theater, which is a 250-seat theater. And other producers outside of the community saw it and says, oh my God, this needs to reach a larger audience. We did what we were supposed to do, and that is to assist these artists to go to a larger arena to get their messages out. And so now it's at the Union Square Theater on 17th Street, and the show is called Through the Night, and it stars Daniel Beatty. And Daniel Beatty is a Harlemite who is an unbelievable artist that I am so proud of, to say that that I'm very, very attached to his work as an artist. And some people have whispered to me, and some have said publicly, that he is the next Paul Robeson. And that is what
What kind of compliment is that?
That is, and it comes from very, very respected. I mean, you're talking about the Ruby Dees and Ozzie Davis. That's how I was introduced to him, from them. So that is quite an endorsement. And then a week ago, Bill Cosby spoke so highly of him and wrapped his arms around him and said, this is the bridge between the old and the new. And clearly he can speak to young people in a way that a lot of the productions that we could do can't speak to them. And so that's what I'm also looking for. How are we getting to the younger audience? What is the legacy going to look like, and what is it going to be?
Yeah, black theater's always dealt with the trials and tribulations, the aspirations of African Americans. In the old days, you would have plays like Raisin in the Sun.
Yes.
You have August Wilson's plays like Fences.
Yes.
What is the theme of some of the newer black plays?
But you just said something. You mentioned Lorraine Hansberry.
Yeah.
Raisin in the Sun, right? The Schomburg Center has a Lorraine Hansberry exhibition, and they're going back to her first work, Young, Gifted, and Black.
That's right.
They have commissioned my theater company to do a version of it for young people, and that's going to happen on October the 14th at the Schomburg. And then that evening, we're going to assemble some of the original cast members, Carmel Yarborough, Gertrude Jeanette, Mickey Grant, Harry Belafonte produced it on Broadway, and we're going to have this discussion.
That's excellent.
But it also touches on what you just said. It's about the young people, how do they connect? And some of the themes that we're dealing with now, for me, I'm all over the place. So I see international issues. I see local issues. I want to deal with the local economies, the global economy. I want to deal with ethnicity. I want to deal with politics. I want to do all of that, and I want my young people to be engaged by looking at the headlines in the papers, writing about it. Give me spoken word pieces, give me monologues, give me poems, give me songs, give me choreography, but on issues that impact on what's happening in this world and in the society that we live in today. Because if that's not happening, then they are going to be left out of the conversation. So through the arts, I want to be able to create an interest and an involvement.
If someone who's watching this program, young or old, wants to contact you and send you some material, how do they do it? New
Heritage Theater Group, our phone number is 212-862-7200, and our website is New Heritage Theater. Theater is spelled THEATRE.org, and they can go to our website and see the information.
And you'll probably be swamped because
many
of us think we have artistic talents and we just want to get it out there.
Well, I really want to be swamped because there has to be this interest in keeping the arts alive and well in our communities, and we can only do that with the next generation of individuals, not only in terms of talent, but in terms of the audience. So when they also call, they can tell me that they would like to volunteer, that they would like to be supportive in getting on our mailing list, that if they know of places where we can go for funding, that would also be helpful. It's not only saying that you visit a theater. Treat us like you treat your houses of worship, where parents still take their kids to church. Take them to a theater, and that becomes very important. And let me also say, I can't stress enough the importance of the work, so especially in Harlem, of the business sector, like the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, of having a website that deals, it's called Broadway and Beyond. And it really highlights to the business community the events and activities that we're doing. So we're getting—
Give an example of that.
Well, just recently during Harlem Week, we partnered with the Broadway League. The Broadway League represents over 600 producers in Broadway theaters. And what we decided to do with the Broadway League is specifically to talk about how can we get parents to take their kids to shows, Broadway and off-Broadway. And they came up with a program that said that you could take, if a person buys a full-price ticket, any accompanied young person, 18 and under, could go free. That was one thing. Further, we talked about, well, what kind of jobs are available in this industry? And we did a one-day symposium at the County Cullen Library where people from the league came and talked about the behind-the-scene opportunities and how they got to do that. Most importantly, the last component is to deal with marginal families who really can't afford to give their to give their family an experience. And so we have agreed that we will select 30 families and treat them to 3 Broadway shows. Every 4 months, they see a show. It costs them nothing. We will find people to donate the cost, but it will be very minimum. But at least that family, up to 6 members in a family, could have that experience.
How do they get on the list?
You have to really be marginally challenged.
Well, how does somebody in our audience get on the
Well,
list?
what happens is that it has to be very controlled initially, and what we're doing is we're working with certain social service organizations, Children's Aid Society, and programs like that, where we really know people in shelters, families that are displaced, that really could use another kind of experience that they may never get. So we just rolled it out this summer. The first group will be selected for October, and then in February, and then in the fall. But as I get a chance to come back and we expand the program, I will surely share it with your viewers.
Now, arts is not only entertainment, but arts is really political. And black art is probably more political than art in general, or maybe art in general is political. What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's interesting. Again, I'm part of a cultural center called the Dwyer Cultural Center, and it's a facility at 123rd Street and St. Nicholas Avenue, created by 2 not-for-profits, Community Works, and the International Communications Association. Currently, we have an exhibit that looks at the black arts movement of the 1960s. And that is when Amiri Baraka and others started looking at Afrocentric images in all the work that they were doing. So from theater and from the visual arts. And they started this movement. Black is beautiful. It was the height of the beginning of the Black Power movement. We have now taken those discussions, that artwork, and brought that to this center in Harlem called the Dwyer Cultural Center, so that we can have these ongoing discussions. So in November, we are having Amiri Baraka come in and talk about what was it like in the 60s when you were using political overtones to get people engaged in the arts and culture. We will follow up with Peter Bailey talking to the theater groups who were all formed in the early 60s to get involved, and then we're going to have a joint discussion between the visual artists and the performing artists. What was it like? So we'll bring people from the last poets. I spoke to Felipe Luciano the other day, and he was a member of the Young Lords, and he was telling me, he said, Voza, you know I went to prison as a member of the Young Lords, and I came out in the 60s, and there were these groups who were in Harlem, in East Harlem, talking about Black Power and the things that we needed to do, and all of this political ferment was happening in those communities. And out of that, there was a transition that took place, and a lot of the theater companies, like I mentioned, Coalition of Theaters of Color, we were all born out of that movement, and we're still here today. Dance Theater of Harlem, Jazz Mobile. You start thinking about that.
Well, what can the arts do to help our young people have more respect for themselves and their culture?
Well, Again, what we do at the Dwyer Cultural Center through Community Works programming is that we bring in educators, we create curriculums. Community Works has a program called Making a Difference. In New York City, there are 51 council districts. Community Works are in 50 of those council districts with Making a Difference programs. And Making a Difference is to look and to identify individuals in the community and to write about them, to document, to use the same tools again that we use in doing productions, and then we bring in documentary photographers and videographers to create books, curriculums, and exhibitions around those individuals so that they can get a sense to heighten their literary skills by actually doing interviews with people like yourself and others who have made a difference. We don't want to lose that history. We have to engage the teachers. We have to assist them by bringing in facilitators who know how to move the arts along with the educational curriculum. It's a mammoth task, but through the Community Works program, we're reaching 300,000 students every year in the 50 council districts across the city.
Today on African American Legends, we've been talking with Voza Rivers, the CEO of the New Heritage Theater Group, about the role of the arts in our community. Thanks for being with us today, Voza.
Thank you.